Some news came out on Friday regarding Frank Mir, the United States Anti-Doping Agency, handing him a 2-year suspension, does get a year for time served. So essentially in a little less than a year from now, he will be clear to come back. But there's a lot to talk to Frank about. If you'll recall, we had him on around early July, spoke about this a bit, but we didn't know where things would fall and what his future would be. So really wanted to talk to him after the news came out to see what he thinks about it and where he goes from here. He's kind enough to join us on the phone right now. Frank, are you there?
Yeah, man. How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you for joining us, Frank. So first things first, why did it take so long for this announcement to come out? Like I said, this happened over a year ago, and here we are. I mean, it's almost 14 months since it happened. Why, in your opinion, did it take so long?
Well, first of all, it was because I was trying to test all the supplements, and the things that I knew of that I came in contact with from February until March, or when I took the test, because they first came into my home when they told me and notified me about the failed test that was during the fight in Brisbane. They said, well, you were clean in February when we randomly drug tested you, so obviously it's something in between that period of time. And I thought it was going to be fairly easy to narrow down, because once USADA got involved with the UFC, I had a whole cabinet full of different supplements. For a while there, I was heavily into wanting to get into powerlifting to boost up my strength. But the list of all the stuff on their agenda that could possibly cause a false positive was so big. I'm like, look, you know what? I'll take a multivitamin, some aspirin, and fish oil, call it a day. And I threw everything else away. So the few things I did take, I went ahead and had them test. And it takes a long time to send this to the lab. It's all out of your own pocket. It's not like USADA helps you try to prove that you're innocent and whatever. They're not in the business of that. And so then I find out more recently that my test in February, that the one that they said was negative for anything, they came back and said, well, we resent it to a different lab, one of our labs, and retested it. Now it's also saying that you have this metabolite in your system. So the problem I'm having with that is I'm like, all right, guys, you told me I had an 8-week period to focus on, and I've been spending a lot of money trying to figure out what happened. Now you're telling me that it can go back years before this, when I was taking all kinds of supplements, all legal over the counter, but now I have to be in the same situation with other athletes, testing it, running through to make sure no one put anything in there that would spike their product to increase performance. And now I'm kind of stuck in this quasi-land where I don't know. And then on top of that, I'm getting a lot of feedback, finding out, and it's something that I showcased on my podcast, Phone Booth Fighting, that I received, that the doctor that basically invented this new test that they're using, he's being sued by several athletes because they're finding out that this test comes out with false positives all the time. The deputy prime minister of Russia said that they found it after someone drank coffee. I'm like, okay, so is this test that I failed even a legitimate test?
Did you know that they had the ability to go back and test a sample that they had once said was, all well and good, all cleared?
Oh, no, because I figured that once they came back and said it was clear, that was one of my initial arguments. How can I be clear in February and have a low level of metabolite that you said your science, due to half-life and the amount of time it takes to break down in my system, basically for me to have these low-level amounts, you would have found the drug itself in my system had I taken it right after that clean test. But instead now, you said that it was clean. I'm like, well, that's impossible. You're like, well, it is what it is, basically, is the answer that I received from them. Then they go back, and sure enough, I was right. It's not possible. And they rechecked their own narrative, finding out that they were wrong in the first place. That either A, which I thought was kind of stupid. I'm like, you guys were in my kitchen, USADA, and told me that the other test was clean. Well, why did you send it to another lab? And now you're telling me that that lab never could test for it in the first place. I wouldn't have just focused on only 8 weeks of my life. I would have went, oh, okay, well, now this new test shows there's metabolites in my system. How far back can it go? Years. Okay, shit, well, let's break out the notepad and let's get this process started. But instead, because you guys failed to test it the first time, told me that you tested it, basically, because, I mean, why else are you going to tell me I'm clean if you didn't test it? That makes no sense to me. You can't sit there and go, well, hey, you passed the test. Did I take it? No, but you didn't fail. I'm like, but that makes no sense. What are you trying to, is this a wording from an attorney where I have to sit there and go, all right, did I fail the test? No. Did you test me for it? Well, no, but you didn't fail. That to me is a very childish logic. So now that's basically the situation I'm in, where now I'm like, all right, now do I spend X amount of money more going after the supplements I've taken for the last 3 years ago now, because it's already a year afterwards into the first test, or do I just ride out the rest of the suspension? But kind of like, I don't know, it just doesn't sit well with me. It angers me to not be able to figure out what's going on. And do I, in one sense, the wife and the management's like, look, let's stop throwing money at this. Just ride it out. You'll be fighting in a year. But that's not good enough for me.
And to be clear, what USADA is saying you tested positive for was a long-term metabolite known as DHCMT. It has a much longer name, but I will probably botch it. So that's the shorthand for it.
Better than I do.
Did you consider?
Yeah, so it's some long-level metabolite, which could have been in any supplement that I've taken, because as we've seen before with guys like Tim Means, guys like Joe Ribeiro, companies will come out and they'll create a supplement and they'll put things in there that shouldn't be in there, so the supplement gets great results. And then, they'll take it out eventually if they get caught. Like, for example, that happens all the time with male enhancement pills. You go to any of the gas stations and they have these male enhancement pills that, for $20 you can buy. Come to find out, the more research I've done into companies not being tested by the FDA, like the supplement company is, they'll actually have real Viagra, real Cialis in these pills. And then when they get caught, a year later, finally it comes to they just close shop and redo it under a different name. And supplement companies have been known to do that. We've seen our own athletes in the UFC unintentionally ingest things that they shouldn't have ingested, but not knowing it because the supplement company put it in there. So now I don't have I'm not being given the same opportunity at this point that other athletes were to go back and test, because of the fact USADA first tells me, well, you were clean in February, the metabolites introduced your system into March. That's your window of opportunity that this occurred. Focus on that, Frank. Now I'm being told, no, it could go back years. I'm sorry. We probably should have tested that to begin with to find out, but we didn't. We waited till later because eventually it did sound stupid that, how do you have these low-level long-term metabolites in March, but you have nothing in your system in February? And now I have to be told that, I'm already over a year removed from it, farther back than even I have to go, which only makes it that much more difficult.
Are you planning on appealing this, or by them coming out with the final sanction, if you will, is that an indication that you are not going to appeal this?
No, at this point, I don't know how I could even try to begin to appeal.
Okay, because it's impossible to know when it happened because there's such a long shelf life for this metabolite?
Correct. So it could have been some supplement company that I took 3 years ago that I wouldn't even begin to go at how to figure that out, because, before Reebok, I got sponsored quite a bit by different companies.
Yeah.
And I've had, a cabinet full of supplements. The most professional fighters can tell you that, up until recently, you get sent things all the time. Hey, try this out. Hey, try this. If you like it, we'll pay you X amount of money a month to represent our company. But once USADA came in July, I knew they were taking over. I looked at it and go, you know what? Even though these are all from supplement companies, why take the chance? I threw a lot of stuff away. 95% of everything in my medicine cabinet, I just picked it up, threw it away, go, well, why take the chance of something, giving me a false positive or something being in there that shouldn't be in, because ultimately the athlete's responsible for what he puts in his body. So I just narrowed it down very simply. I'm like, all right, I'll just take these 2 or 3 supplements. We know where they come from, and just, that way I can play a much safer game.
How do you feel about the 2-year suspension? Were you hoping that it would be less?
Honestly, I'm hoping to figure out where it came from. The time of suspension doesn't bother me as much as not knowing when it was introduced to my system. That truly is a frustrating part.
Yeah.
You're being told, like, well, you're guilty of this. I'm like, well, when? Well, we don't exactly know. How? We don't exactly know. But we know you're guilty. Well, that's kind of infuriating. It's like to not know where it came from, how I was exposed to it. That pisses me off. The lack of knowledge, and then also the lack on their part that this test is so new that they don't really know either. And then I'm sitting here going, all right, well, you guys don't know the test is so new, but to find out that the guy that created the test got fired from the labs in Russia, and now he's being sued, and they don't even think that the test is even accurate to begin with. I'm like, oh, okay, so maybe I don't even have to. So, I mean, all this money I'm spending chasing down supplements, I was just pissing away. Like, the test itself's not even accurate to begin with. I mean, what does that mean? That is someone going to come back and reimburse me for my wages and money spent chasing on a witch hunt that never even existed in the first place?
Could you give us a rough estimate how much you've spent thus far on this?
So far, just testing supplements alone has been close to $30,000.
Whoa! Wow!
If I send something to a lab and have them break it down, it's not cheap. It isn't like it's like, all right, yeah, a couple $100 and we'll go ahead and run your this compound through the gauntlet.
Yeah. Wow.
It costs money, and it's money again that as a fighter, USADA doesn't help us with that at all. We're really kind of left alone, and that's why. And then talk about that. I know, and that's his business to disclose it. I know the kind of money that John Jones spent to contest this and go to arbitration, and it's a lot more than what I've spent so far. So what do fighters do in these situations where we're finding out the guys are innocent? USADA's finding metabolites and supplements, and you find out that we weren't intentionally cheating, but we're getting caught up in the net anyways. How does a fighter who's only making 6 and 6 ever begin to even have an opportunity to face this?
Right.
Really, honestly, I mean, without us not having a union, kind of in this situation, like this is the first time I've ever kind of sat and went, damn, dude, we actually need someone on our side to help us. Whereas a baseball player, a football player, a basketball player runs into this situation, he has representation from a players' union to him out. We don't. We're pretty much on our own. And thankfully, I've had a successful career that I have a little bit of money to try to fight this. What about the guys that don't? What if a prelim guy gets falsely accused or takes something from a supplement company he wasn't aware of? Where does he even begin to financially be able to battle this?
It's a fantastic point. It's one that's been raised many times, including earlier on our show with Ally Quinta. Are you one of those guys who maybe 2 years ago didn't feel this way? And now, is this something that you're going to try to focus on? Do you feel like, as one of the older fighters, veterans who's now experienced this, do you think that it's imperative that the fighters in the UFC have some kind of association, someone backing them when this kind of stuff comes up?
I think so, because right now, I mean, you have the promoters, and obviously they have their objective. You have, now USADA, who has their objective, and you have a fighter. And there's really nobody in the middle that's trying to bridge that gap. I mean, you have a manager, but the management's on your side. They're not being looked at as a neutral party. And from what I understand in other sports that have a players' union, that's why they have it. You have to have that third group that comes in and goes, all right, we're going to do what's best for the sport and what's best for the athletes. Let's try to bring both groups forward and not at the detriment of one or the other.
Last time I spoke to you, you said that you were hoping to get released to go fight elsewhere. Is that still your hope?
I think so. I don't know what's going to happen, to be honest with you. I'm looking, that maybe leaving, especially since this metabolite, I have no guarantees that it's not still in my system unless I go and spend the money now to go get tested for it. But what is that going to do for me? If USADA comes in, you're still in the testing pool. I can't imagine. I've done this now for 2 years, not fight. I go and take a fight, and this metabolite in low levels, they can't tell me that it's not still in my system because this test doesn't show when it finally gets out. Do I get a pass? Do they say, okay, well, we don't know when it leaves, so if it's still in your system, we'll go ahead and give you. Do I get a TUE or some kind of exemption because we don't know how long it takes to excrete out of my system? Or am I told that I don't fight till it leaves my system? I don't know.
So I was told that they actually have in their statute, they can go back 10 years and look at things. Did you have any idea before? Like, did you read the fine print? One thing that's come up when talking to people in the UFC about, USADA and Reebok is that, you had to sign a waiver. And if you didn't, you weren't going to fight. And in hindsight, maybe it wasn't the smartest thing to sign that waiver. Do you kind of feel the same way?
Absolutely, I do. And I think that comes down to the fact, again, with us not having any kind of union, some kind of middleman. I mean, what are you going to do? The UFC comes to you and says, hey, we're going to implement this new rule. Everybody's going to wear the same shorts.
Yeah.
If you don't sign the paper, you can't fight. Do you think anybody didn't sign the paper? I mean, like, really, I mean, who doesn't sign? You know, like, don't sign or don't fight.
Right.
Well, what kind of really choice is that? Like, well, now you get to be held by these standards. It's like I was kind of put in a situation of duress. It'd be like your employer coming to you and saying, if you don't start wearing this or this hat, we're going to fire you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, like, sign this and say you're okay with it. I'm all, but I'm not. I'm just doing it under duress. You threatened me. You know, you said you're going to take away an opportunity for me to make a livelihood, and that's why I'm signing it. You know, like, I can't imagine too many court documents would actually stand up in the court of law being like, well, did you sign this free will? Not really, man. I was kind of a little bit threatened of my job.
So have you actually spoken to Dana White and asked for your release?
No, I've tried to make a few phone calls, and I actually just called Dana again a couple days ago. I've never been able to get in contact with him, and the few times he's reached back to me, he's reached back through Reed Harris, has spoken to me, because I thought that when I was getting the doctor into the Nevada Hall of Fame that I was going to have, I thought having Dana there because of both of our careers correlating with the UFC so greatly, I thought that would be great to have him as far as one of the presenters. When I called and put that forward, I never spoke to him. I never got to have that conversation.
Wow. So when's the last time you actually talked to him?
Before the fight.
Before all this happened?
I haven't spoken to any UFC official besides Reed Harris, who's called me. But as far as Lorenzo or Dana, no, I haven't spoken to anybody. I tried. I called personal cell phones and whatnot, but I haven't received any word back.
Considering what you've meant to that company and the shows that you headline, does that bother you?
Very much so. I think that we all, people get into binds all the time and situations arise. But I thought not only from a business point of view, but just as far as friends, because I've gone to Dana before in the past and I've had issues and things come up, throughout my career and just personal life. And he was always open arms before and invited me in the office. And I've sat down and talked to him and said, hey, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with that. Can you help me out? Kind of from a big brother point of view. And I thought maybe this was another situation like that. And I guess not. So I don't know.
Do you feel like he's kind of like washing his hands of you? Like he wants nothing to do, doesn't want to help you out, at least hear you out?
That would be making me an assumption on his state of mind. And without me talking to him, okay. I really don't know. I don't know if he was told not to speak.
Okay.
They have a whole legal team there at the UFC. I don't know, to be honest with you.
Well, now that
I've wrapped my brain, I wouldn't have called him again just this last Friday if I thought there was a reason why he wasn't talking to me. Obviously I don't understand, or I would stop calling.
Now that the sanction is out, do you still feel like there's a chance that they might release you, or do you think that you're a year in, less than a year left, they're gonna keep you around and see what happens?
I really don't know how it works because. Right now, I've been able to try to survive because of my broadcasting, doing seminars, but not fighting is difficult as far as, with the, I have a wife, I have kids all in private school. It's not been easy, but obviously, as a man, you have to figure it out. I can't go to my kids and my wife and say, well, I'm sorry, but we're moving into an apartment and this is just how it is.
Right.
So I've made men's, through working with ACB, the XFN there in Oklahoma. Now, like this weekend, I'm flying out to Fight Night Global to help them out with the broadcasting. So I've tried to just to make things work as well as possible, but I don't even know if I'm allowed to discuss things with other organizations to find out if I can fight for them or not. So I'm kind of in this limbo. But at the same time, I don't know if they can really hold me under contract. I've actually reached out to a different attorney that doesn't just deal with, the USADA issue, but as far as on the business end, looking at it going, well, can UFC also tell me that I can't fight for anybody else, but they don't allow me to fight for them? So essentially, you're basically causing me not to be able to make a living now. How does that work legally? I mean, if I was a musician and I made music, you tell me, okay, well, we're not going to we're not going to pay you for your music anymore. Can you keep me under contract where I can't make music for somebody else? Or because of the contract, you basically can tell me well, if you make music, it's only for us. That's kind of how I thought the UFC contract worked. It's like, when you fight for us. Okay, so I can't sit there and tell you not allow me to make a living. If I'm able and physically able to fight, you guys allow me to fight. But now, through your guys' regulatory, basically your policy, because USADA isn't an athletic commission. I'm not banned by Nevada Athletic Commission, the New York Athletic Commission, California Athletic Commission. I fought out of the country. So this is purely a sanction coming from the UFC. They're the ones that actually have the actual power to sit there and tell me I can't fight. But they're also the ones I have a contract with saying that I can only fight for them. So I'm actually now, because of the recent events, really starting to push that issue and find out, like, well, what are my rights? What can I do?
Considering how this all has gone down and, the aftermath and trying to reach out and all that stuff, do you even still want to fight for the UFC? Let's say the time expires and you're free. Like, is it still, something that you want to do? Would you still want to fight for these guys?
My feelings have been hurt, yes, if that's what you're asking. I don't feel the same about the company as I felt years ago. I feel, and I'm seeing that even with some of the way that they're handling things that they handle now. There's been several times where I'm like, wow, if Lorenzo was still there at the office, if Dana still was in full control and not just, a minority shareholder, would that have ever happened? I'm like, I don't know about that. If they would have done it or handled this situation particularly like that. In other situations that I've seen in the news where I'm like, well, I don't really know if it's the same company that I started with 15 years ago.
Yeah, what is a very unfortunate thing. At the very least, I would hope that you can get a phone call when this all comes out, and maybe there is a legal reason for that. But to be clear, if they did give you the okay to go elsewhere, you're ready to fight. You'd like to fight. You want to keep fighting.
Oh, I do. I'm only 37. I'll be 38 next month. I like martial arts. I like competing. Going out and winning titles or trying to have steam, that's a great side effect, but I like living like a martial artist. I like that my job is to go to the gym and train and hang out and talk to other fighters, and that's the environment that I'm in. And I want to prolong that as far as possible. I see guys like Randy Couture, guys like Dan Henderson that fought well into their mid and late 40s. Even in boxing, you see guys like Bernard Hopkins that fights when he's 50. It's like, all right, it's possible. Are you going to always be able to vie for championships like, some other, I don't know, that's difficult. But regardless if I lost every fight for the rest of my life, I like fighting. Fighting is fun. I like training for fights. I like competing. I think that I'm in the same category as 99% of the world. A lot of guys go down to the local jiu-jitsu or kickboxing gym and train, and they pay someone else to do it. And they're never, ever going to get paid to live that life. I happen to be lucky that I get paid to, but that's not my motivation for doing it. There's tons of people right now that are at a gym lifting weights that are never going to step on a stage, but you enjoy that lifestyle. You like to lift. I like to fight. I enjoy martial arts. I just happen to be lucky enough that through my talents and abilities that people wanted to pay to watch me do it.
And finally, are you officially turning the page on all of this, or is there still, that fighter in you that's going to keep poking around, keep trying to figure out how to clear your name?
Oh, no, I'm always going to be constantly consumed with how to clear. Look, once somebody accuses you of something, I'm never going to be completely clear of it. That's just the reality of the matter. I'm always going to have the naysayers to say that I took something knowingly. And even if I come back and they find out with irrefutable proof that I'm 100% innocent, there's always going to be tagged onto my name. I acknowledge that. But for me and for my family, I want to know what happened and how it happened. Because of my own, that's for me, I want to, who wants to go? I'm kind of a knowledge kind of guy. I don't know if you've ever gathered that from me, but I'm kind of a deep thinker about a lot of stuff. I like to know why, that's probably why I got kicked out of church when I was a kid, I'm just that guy. I question everything, I'm like, well, how come, well, why? Well, why does it have to be that way? Or why did you do it this way? And so this not knowing, my wife even told me that. I was sitting there, it was a couple days after the initial thing, and I was freaking out, trying to figure out what was going on. And she told me, she goes, I feel so bad for you. I'm like, why? She goes, because I realized you not knowing how this happened is worse than you than death. The lack of knowledge is going to kill you. It eats you up inside. I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's destroyed me. I have to know.
Well, I certainly feel for you, Frank, and I wish you the best, and I appreciate you coming on and talking about this, and I want to remind people that if they want to hear more on your situation, your side of things, they can check out Phone Booth Fighting. That's your podcast phoneboothfighting.com. I do believe you have a new episode up talking about this in greater detail. So I suggest everyone does check that out. And keep up the great work on the commentary side of things. Great to see you back with ACB. I know a couple of weeks ago you did a show, and it was great to hear you again. In fact, Miguel Torres' recent retirement reminded me of how great you were on those Versus broadcasts back in the day. So I hope that you get more opportunities to do that and keep up with the podcast stuff as well. And I hope that we get to see you fight again. If that's what you want, I hope that at some point you get to continue your career in fighting. Appreciate it, Frank. All the best to you, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for coming on.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you for the platform. Thank you.
All right, there he is. Frank Mir, of course, the former UFC heavyweight champion, has his own podcast. Like I said, Phone Booth Fighting. Him and Richard Hunter do a great job over there. So do check them out.